I need you to log in. Just for an hour. My boss, Mark Reynolds, didn't even look at me when he said it. He just stared at his computer screen, his fingers tapping away at the keyboard like I wasn't even standing there. This is Revenge Room. If this is the first time you are seeing our video, kindly like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. I was leaning against the doorframe of his office, pale and shaking. My head was pounding so hard I could barely keep my eyes open. The fever had hit me in the middle of the night, and by morning I could hardly stand. I have a fever of 102, I said, holding onto the doorframe for support. I went to urgent care this morning. The doctor said I need rest. He sighed loudly. The kind of sigh that said I was wasting his time. Lena, we all get sick. The difference is some of us push through it. Then he finally leaned back in his chair and looked at me. His eyes were cold. If you can't handle the pressure, maybe this isn't the right role for you. My chest tightened. I felt my throat close up. I've never taken a sick day in 3 years. Then today's a bad day to start. I turned to leave his office, my legs barely holding me up. Actually, he said behind me. I stopped in the doorway, my hands still on the frame. Don't bother coming back tomorrow. The room went silent. Even the hum of his computer seemed to fade away. You're terminated. Effective immediately. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. If I turned around, he would see my face, and I refused to give him that. I walked back to my desk in a daze. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me, suddenly too bright. My coworkers kept their heads down, pretending to type, pretending they hadn't heard the whole thing through the thin office walls. I packed my things in under 10 minutes. A coffee mug. A small plant my mother had given me. A framed photo of my dog. That was it. 3 years of my life, fitting into one small cardboard box. Nobody said a word to me. Nobody got up. Except Jess from accounting. She walked over slowly, her eyes wide and confused. Wait, what happened? Flu, I said quietly. She blinked at me, like she was trying to understand. That's it? I nodded once and kept walking toward the elevator. As the elevator doors closed behind me, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. It was an email from Mark. The subject line said, Transition Plan. For a second, I thought maybe he was sending instructions. Maybe he was telling me how to hand off my projects, who to talk to, what to finish before I left. I opened it. There was no plan. Just one single line of text. All operational responsibilities reassigned. Do not access company systems. That was it. 3 years of work, summed up in 9 words. I stared at the screen as the elevator descended. The numbers ticking down on the display. Floor 12. Floor 11. Floor 10. And as I stared at that email, something strange happened. The fever fog in my brain started to clear. The shock of being fired began to fade. And in its place, a quiet thought rose up. He didn't know. Mark didn't know what I actually did at that company. He didn't know what kept the lights on. He didn't know which threads held everything together. But I did. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and I walked out into the cold morning air, my cardboard box pressed against my chest. There was no system without me. He just hadn't figured that out yet. I had built everything at that company. Not officially. Not in my job description. But over 3 years, I had quietly stitched together every broken process they had. It started small. A vendor wouldn't accept our payments, so I called them and worked out a new system. A client kept sending the wrong forms, so I built a checklist nobody else had. A spreadsheet kept breaking, so I rewrote the whole thing. Each fix led to another fix. Each problem led to another problem. And before I knew it, I was holding the entire operation together with quiet phone calls, hidden documents, and workarounds that only I understood. Mark never asked what I did all day. He just saw the results. The clients were happy. The vendors got paid. The reports came out on time. So as far as he was concerned, everything was fine. I never bragged about any of it. I didn't want credit. I just wanted the work to get done. I thought if I kept my head down and did good work, I would be safe. I thought my value was obvious. I was wrong about that part. But I wasn't wrong about the work. The work was real. And the work was about to disappear. The first few days at home, I just slept. The fever broke on day 2, but my body felt heavy and tired. I let myself rest for the first time in years. I didn't check my email. I didn't check my phone. I just stayed in bed and let the world keep moving without me. On day 4, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Jess. Hey, random question. Do you remember how the vendor portal sync works? I stared at the message for a long time. I knew exactly how it worked. I had built that sync myself, after the old one broke for the 3rd time in a month. A second message came through. That thing's been down all morning. Mark is freaking out. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat up in bed and thought for a moment. Then I typed back. Did Mark approve the workaround doc I sent last month? I waited. The 3 little dots appeared, then disappeared. Then appeared again. What workaround doc? I leaned back slowly against my pillows. So he had ignored it. He had ignored the document I had sent him, the one explaining exactly what to do if the sync went down. The first crack had appeared in the wall. And I had a feeling it wouldn't be the last. A week passed, and Jess kept texting me. Not asking for help anymore. Just venting. A shipment had been delayed by 3 days. Nobody could figure out why. A client invoice had gone out with the wrong amount on it, and the client had threatened to pull their contract. A confused customer call had been escalated to leadership twice in one afternoon. None of it was dramatic on its own. None of it was the kind of thing that would make the news. But all of it was familiar. Painfully familiar. These were the exact problems I had been quietly preventing for years. The vendor delays I caught before they happened. The invoice mistakes I corrected before they went out. The customer issues I handled before they reached anyone important. Now, with me gone, every single one of those problems was happening at once. I sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee and reading Jess's texts. I didn't feel happy about it. I didn't feel like I was getting revenge. I just felt sad. Because all of this was preventable. All of it. If Mark had just listened, just once, none of it would be happening. But he hadn't listened. And now the company was paying for it. One small problem at a time. 2 days later, Jess forwarded me an email. She wasn't supposed to. But she did anyway. It was from Mark. He had sent it to all of leadership. Lena's performance had been declining for months. Her unreliability forced us to make a difficult decision. I read it twice. Then a 3rd time. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't catch. But something inside me went very, very still. He wasn't just replacing me. He was rewriting me. He was telling everyone above him that I was the problem. That I was unreliable. That firing me had been the responsible thing to do. It was a lie. A complete, careful lie. And he had told it to protect himself. I closed the email and stared at the wall for a long time. 3 years of perfect attendance. 3 years of saving his skin behind the scenes. 3 years of being the one who stayed late, came in early, fixed the problems nobody else could see. And now I was the unreliable one. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just stood up, walked to my home office, and pulled out my personal laptop. It was time to look at what I had saved. Quietly. Privately. Over the past 3 years. I opened my personal folders. The ones I had kept on my own computer, on my own time, with my own notes. Folder after folder appeared on the screen. Every process I had ever documented. Every email I had ever sent warning about a problem. Every workaround I had built. Every late-night fix I had made. I hadn't started saving these files after I got fired. I had started months ago. Because something had felt wrong for a long time. Mark had been changing. He had been getting more impatient, more dismissive. He had been taking credit for things he hadn't done. And some quiet voice in the back of my head had told me to start keeping records. I had listened to that voice. Now, sitting at my kitchen table, I was glad I had. I scrolled through the folders. There were emails where I had warned Mark about vendor risks. Emails where I had explained why certain processes needed to stay in place. Emails he had ignored, deleted, or replied to with a single word. There were screenshots of the workaround documents. Time stamps. Read receipts. Everything. I had a complete record of every warning I had given, every problem I had prevented, every solution I had built. And I had a feeling I was going to need it. 2 weeks after I got fired, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to pick up. Hello? Hi, is this Lena? The voice was warm and professional. My name is Patricia Holloway. I'm the operations director at Northbridge Logistics. I was wondering if you had a few minutes to talk. Northbridge. I knew that name. They were one of our partner companies. We worked with them on at least 3 big accounts. Sure, I said carefully. What can I help you with? Well, your name has come up quite a bit in our recent meetings, Patricia said. Mostly in problem-solving contexts. People keep mentioning that you used to handle things that nobody else seems to know how to handle now. I almost laughed out loud. But I kept my voice steady. I see. We've been having some difficulties with one of our shared accounts. And honestly, our team has been asking why you aren't involved anymore. I didn't say anything for a moment. Are you open to consulting work? Patricia asked. I paused. I thought about my bills. I thought about my pride. I thought about the email Mark had sent. Depends, I said. On what? On who I'd be working with. She hesitated on the other end of the line. I could hear her thinking. Well, one of your former clients is involved in this project. My stomach tightened. Which one? She said the name. It was their largest account. The one I had personally managed for 2 years. The one Mark had taken over after firing me. I closed my eyes. So this was the situation. Northbridge needed help with a project that involved my old company. They wanted me to come in and fix something that Mark was probably trying to hide. I should have said no. I should have walked away and let them deal with it themselves. But I didn't. I'll do it, I said. But not as an employee. As a consultant. With my own contract. That's exactly what we were hoping for, Patricia said. We talked through the details for another 20 minutes. The pay was double what I had made at my old job. The hours were flexible. The contract was for 3 months, with the option to extend. I hung up the phone and sat in my quiet kitchen, staring at my notebook. In 3 days, I would be walking into a conference room. Not as an employee. As a consultant. Same table. Different role. 3 days later, I put on my best suit and drove to the meeting. The conference room was on the 14th floor of a tall glass building downtown. Northbridge had rented it for the day. When I walked in, Patricia greeted me warmly and showed me to a seat near the front of the long wooden table. A few minutes later, the door opened, and Mark walked in. He froze when he saw me. Just for a second. His face went pale, and his hand tightened on his briefcase. Then he caught himself. He smiled. Tight. Controlled. The kind of smile a man gives when he's trying very hard to look in charge. "Lena," he said. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Consulting," I replied calmly. I didn't smile back. I just nodded toward the empty chair across from me. He sat down slowly, never taking his eyes off me. Two of his coworkers came in behind him and took the seats on either side of him. They glanced at me, then at him, clearly wondering what was happening. Patricia stood at the head of the table and welcomed everyone. She introduced me as the lead consultant on the project. I watched Mark's jaw tighten when she said it. I kept my hands folded on the table. I kept my breathing slow. I had waited 4 weeks for this moment. Now I just had to do my job. Patricia opened the meeting by laying out the problem. Her voice was calm and clear. "We have 3 major issues," she said. "Shipments have been arriving late for the past 3 weeks. Billing has gone out with errors on multiple accounts. And the contract terms between our 2 companies seem to be misaligned in several places." She paused and looked around the room. "The total exposure is in the millions. We need this fixed, and we need it fixed soon." Mark jumped in quickly. "Maybe too quickly." "We've identified the issues," he said with a confident smile. "Our team is already working on solutions. I'd say we're about 70% of the way to a fix." I didn't say anything. I just watched him. Because I knew the truth. He hadn't identified anything. He hadn't fixed anything. He was bluffing, the way he always bluffed when he didn't actually understand a problem. Patricia nodded politely, but I could see she wasn't convinced. She had been around long enough to recognize empty confidence when she heard it. "That's good to hear, Mark," she said. "Can you walk us through the specific steps you've taken so far?" He hesitated. Just for a moment. But it was long enough. His co-workers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I kept my hands folded and waited. Mark gave a vague answer. He talked about team coordination and process review. He used a lot of business words that meant nothing. Patricia listened politely. Then she asked a follow-up question. "How does your vendor escalation process work now? Specifically, when a shipment gets flagged for delay?" Mark hesitated again. Longer this time. "We have a system in place," he said carefully. "It's been recently updated." That wasn't true. There was no updated system. The vendor escalation process was the one I had built 2 years ago, and Mark didn't know how it worked because he had never asked. Patricia frowned. She glanced at me, then back at Mark. "Could you tell me which team handles the first level of escalation?" Silence. Mark's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the coworker on his left, who was suddenly very interested in his notepad. "I'd have to check on the specifics," Mark finally said. "But I can get back to you with that information." I stayed quiet. I didn't smile. I didn't smirk. But I saw it happen. The exact moment when Patricia stopped trusting him. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted. His confidence was slipping. And everyone in the room could feel it. The meeting ended an hour later. Mark gathered his things quickly and left without looking at me. After everyone else had filed out, Patricia pulled me aside. "Can you fix this?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. I had learned a long time ago that quick answers usually weren't good ones. Instead, I asked her a question of my own. "Do you want a quick fix? Or a real one?" She studied my face for a moment. Then she glanced at the closed door where Mark had just left. "Real." I nodded slowly. "Then I'll need full visibility. Every contract, every email, every workflow. I need access to both sides of this. Yours and theirs." "That's a lot of access," she said carefully. "I know. But you can't fix something you can't see. And right now, nobody can see the whole picture. Including the people who made the mess in the first place." Patricia thought about it for a long moment. Then she nodded. I'll have the paperwork drawn up by tomorrow. I gathered my notebook and stood up to leave. As I walked toward the door, Patricia spoke again. Lena? Off the record. He didn't see you coming, did he? I paused at the door. No, I said quietly. He didn't. The next day, I started digging. Patricia gave me access to everything. Contracts, emails, internal documents, shipping records. I sat at my dining room table with 2 laptops open and 3 notebooks spread out around me. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. Whole processes were missing. Not broken. Missing. Like someone had taken a piece out of a machine and just hoped nobody would notice. Contracts had been misinterpreted. Important clauses had been ignored. Some of them had been signed without anyone reading them carefully. Vendor systems were running on outdated rules. Backup plans had never been put in place. 3 of the workarounds I had built were still being used, but nobody at my old company knew how they worked anymore. It wasn't sabotage. That was the strangest part. Nobody had broken anything on purpose. It had all just fallen apart. Slowly. Quietly. Because the person who had been holding it together was gone, and nobody had bothered to learn what she actually did. I sat back in my chair and took a deep breath. This was bigger than I had thought. Much bigger. But it was also fixable. Because I knew where every thread led. I had built most of them with my own hands. The question was how long it would take. And whether I could get there in time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and the truth finally hit me. Mark hadn't just fired me on a bad day. He hadn't just made one impatient mistake. He had removed the only person who knew how to keep things running. And he had done it without asking a single question about what I actually did. He had assumed I was replaceable. He had assumed someone else could just step in and do my job. He had assumed the systems would keep running on their own. He had been wrong. About all of it, and now, 4 weeks later, he had no idea how to fix what was breaking. Because he had never bothered to learn how it worked in the first place. I thought about all the times I had tried to explain things to him. The meetings where I had brought documents he never read. The emails where I had warned him about risks he ignored. The proposals I had written that he had brushed aside because he didn't think they mattered. It hadn't been about me being unreliable. It had been about him being unable to listen. And now, the cost of all that ignoring was coming due. I turned off the lamp and closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. A week into my consulting work, the situation got worse. The big client called Patricia directly. They were tired of the delays. They were tired of the billing mistakes. They were tired of empty promises from Mark. They issued a warning. Fix it in 2 weeks, or terminate the contract. That contract was 40% of my old company's revenue. 40%. If they lost it, the company would have to lay off staff. Maybe close entire departments. Patricia called me the moment she got off the phone with them. They're serious, Lena. They mean it. I know they do, I said quietly. I worked with them for 2 years. They give one warning, and one warning only. What do we do? I looked at my notes spread across the dining room table. The plan I had been building all week. The fixes I had been quietly putting into place. We accelerate. I can have a stabilization plan ready by Friday. But it's going to require cooperation from Mark's team. They have to give me direct access. No filtering through him. No middle steps. Patricia exhaled slowly. That's going to be a hard sell. He won't like it. I know he won't. But he doesn't have a choice anymore. None of you do. You really think you can save this? I built this, I said. I can rebuild it. But only if everyone gets out of my way. That night, my phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number, but I had a feeling I knew who it was. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Hello? Lena, it's Mark. Silence. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I heard him breathing on the other end of the line. He sounded tired. Tired in a way I had never heard him before. I think we should talk, he said. I almost laughed. A month ago, this man had told me I couldn't handle pressure. He had fired me while I had a fever. He had sent an email to leadership calling me unreliable. And now he wanted to talk. What about? I asked, keeping my voice flat. You know what about, Lena? Things are bad. Really bad. The client is about to walk. The board is asking questions. We need to fix this. I heard him swallow. Can we meet? Just the 2 of us. Tomorrow. Anywhere you want. I thought about it for a long moment. I thought about hanging up. I thought about telling him to figure it out himself. But part of me wanted to see his face. Part of me wanted to hear what he had to say in person. There's a coffee shop on 5th Street, I said finally. Tomorrow. 2 o'clock. I'll be there. Mark? Yeah? Don't be late. I hung up. I got to the coffee shop 10 minutes early. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window. Mark walked in at 1:58. He looked different. Less polished. His tie was slightly crooked. His shirt was wrinkled. There were dark circles under his eyes. He sat down across from me without ordering anything. Thanks for coming, he said. I nodded once and waited. He took a deep breath. Then another. We need your help. I noticed the word he used. Not, I need. He said, we. Like he was hiding behind the company. Like asking for himself was too hard. I held his gaze across the table. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. Do you? I asked quietly. He flinched. Just a little. But he didn't argue. Yes, he said. I do. Personally. I'm asking. That was something. That was actually something. Tell me what's going on, I said. He told me. He told me about the warning from the client. The pressure from leadership. The board meeting that was scheduled for next Wednesday. The fact that 2 senior executives had already started asking questions about how things had gotten so bad so fast. He talked for 10 minutes straight. I listened to every word. And I didn't say anything until he was finished. When he stopped talking, the coffee shop felt very quiet. I know things didn't end well, he said carefully. That's one way to put it, I replied. He winced. He exhaled slowly. We're willing to bring you back. Same role. Same pay. We can even talk about a raise. We just need you back in the building. I shook my head slowly. No. He blinked at me. His mouth opened, then closed. No? No, I said again. I'm not coming back as an employee, Mark. That door closed the moment you fired me with a fever and called me unreliable in writing. His face went pale. He hadn't known I had seen that email. He had assumed Jess wouldn't say anything. Lena, Let me finish, I said calmly. I'm not coming back to that desk. I'm not reporting to you. I'm not pretending the last month didn't happen. He swallowed hard. But, I continued, if I help, it's on my terms. Not yours. Not the company's. Mine. I watched him for a long moment. He looked smaller than I remembered. Smaller than he had looked in his big office, behind his big desk, telling me to push through a fever. What terms? He asked quietly. You won't like them. Try me. I leaned forward and folded my hands on the table. First, I said. I get full control over the recovery plan. I make the calls. I set the priorities. I decide the timeline. He nodded slowly. Second, I report directly to leadership. Not to you. Not to anyone on your team. Straight to the top. His jaw tightened. But he didn't argue. Third, the company puts in writing, on official letterhead, that my previous work was instrumental in keeping operations running. I want acknowledgement of what I built. Not a thank you note. A formal record. Now his face changed. He hadn't expected that one. Lena, that's an admission. That could be used against the company. It could, I said. But it won't be. Because I'm not interested in suing anyone. I'm interested in being honest about what happened. And about what I did. He stared down at the table. Anything else? Yes. The email you sent to leadership about my performance? It gets retracted. In writing. To the same people who got it. He closed his eyes. That's a lot to ask. It's a lot less than you took from me, I said. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. But the next day, I knew, the client would escalate again. And then he wouldn't have a choice. I was right. 2 days later, the client called Patricia again. They had moved up their deadline. They wanted answers by the end of the week, not in 2 weeks. Patricia called me the moment she hung up with them. It's time, Lena. Leadership is calling an emergency meeting. They want you there. In person. Tomorrow morning. Mark? He'll be there. But he won't be running the meeting. The CEO will. I felt something settle in my chest. Calm. Quiet. Steady. I'll be there, I said. That night, I went through my notes one more time. The plan was ready. It had been ready for days. Every step was documented. Every fix was explained. Every timeline was realistic. I had built this plan with the same care I had built everything else over the past 3 years. Quietly. Carefully. Without bragging. Without asking for credit. But this time, I would be in the room when it was presented. This time, I would be the one explaining it. This time, my name would be on every page. I closed my notebook and went to bed early. For the first time in a long time, I felt ready. Not angry. Not vengeful. Just ready. The boardroom was on the top floor of my old company's building. I rode the elevator up alone. Same elevator I had cried in a month ago, holding a cardboard box. Different person now, holding a leather folder full of notes. The doors opened. I walked down the hallway with my head up. The boardroom was already full. The CEO sat at the head of the long table. 2 senior executives sat on either side of him. Patricia was there from Northbridge. And at the far end of the table, Mark was sitting alone, his hands folded in front of him. He looked up when I walked in. He nodded once. I nodded back. The CEO stood up. Lena. Thank you for coming. Please, take a seat. I sat down in the chair he indicated. It was at the front of the room, right next to him. He turned to face the group. As you all know, we are facing a serious situation. We are at risk of losing our largest client. Our internal team has been unable to stabilize the issues. We've asked Lena, in her role as a consultant for Northbridge, to evaluate the situation and propose a plan. He turned to me. Lena. Can you stabilize this? The room went quiet. I looked around the table. At the executives. At the CEO. At Mark, sitting at the far end. Then I nodded. Yes. I can. I walked them through the plan, step by step. I didn't rush. I didn't oversell. I just told them the truth. What was broken? why it was broken, how to fix it, and how long each step would take. When I was done, the CEO looked at the executives on either side of him. They nodded. "Your terms are accepted," he said. "All of them. We'll have the contract ready by tomorrow morning." I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief, exactly. Something deeper than that. Mark wasn't fired. But he was removed from any decision-making related to the recovery. Quietly. Completely. The CEO announced it right there in the meeting, without making a big deal of it. Mark would still have his title. He would still come to work. But the real decisions would go through me now. Mark didn't react. He just nodded once and looked down at his hands. For the first time since I had met him, he had nothing to say. The meeting ended. People started gathering their things and standing up. The CEO shook my hand and thanked me for coming. As I packed my notebook away, I noticed Mark hadn't moved. He was still sitting at the far end of the table, staring at nothing. He didn't look at me. I didn't look at him either. I just walked out of the room and didn't look back. 3 weeks later, the system was stable. The shipments were on time. The billing was clean. The contracts had been renegotiated and signed. The client decided to stay. In the final review meeting, the CEO stood up in front of the entire leadership team. He thanked the staff. He thanked Northbridge. And then, in front of everyone, he said it plainly. This recovery was led entirely by Lena. Without her work, this company would not have survived the past month. I want that on the record. The room went quiet. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just nodded once and accepted it. Mark was sitting in the back of the room. He didn't look at me. He didn't speak. But I could see his face out of the corner of my eye. He knew. He finally knew. The same woman he had fired for being unreliable was the only reason the company still stood. The same woman he had told to push through a 102 fever was the one who had saved his job, his team, and the contract that paid all their salaries. And this time, everyone else knew it too. After the meeting, I walked out of the building one last time. Not with a cardboard box this time. With my consulting contract extended for another year. With my reputation rebuilt. With my name on every official document. I had never wanted revenge. I had just wanted the truth. And the truth, in the end, had spoken for itself.